Hi everybody, this is video segment 2, biogeochemical cycles and water cycle. So biogeochemical cycle, if you look at that word, bio means life, geo means earth, you have chemical and you have a cycling process. So you have basically a chemical that is cycling through the biosphere and geosphere, and the other spheres are also included in there too. But officially, it's defined as an element found in different forms and compounds that moves within and between the Earth systems and spheres. Biogeochemical cycles, you don't have to write any of this down, but this is just some general information that you need to keep in mind as we go through each of the cycles. By the way, we're going to be learning water, carbon, and nitrogen. Those are all forms of biogeochemical cycles. The Earth is a system containing essentially a fixed amount of each stable chemical atom or element. Remember, it's a closed system. What we have is what we have. It's what we've had all along. Most elements can exist in several different states and chemical forms, and they move within and between the geosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere as part of the Earth system science, really. The movements can be slow or rapid, and we'll talk about those. The elements and the compounds have very significant impacts on the biosphere and have very important impacts on human health. So we'll talk about environmental issues as they pertain to these cycles and the spheres. So starting with the water cycle, main idea is that the energy that drives the water cycle is coming from the sun. Transpiration is water that's released by the leaves of plants. Evapotranspiration is the process by which all of the water vapor gets into the atmosphere. I know these two words might be brand new to you. Transpiration was covered in biology, but evapotranspiration is a brand new word. That, if you can see, combines two words, evaporation and transpiration. So it's going to scientists don't know whether the vapor got into the air through transpiration or evaporation, so they just lump it all into one scientific word. So runoff is a water that runs off across the surface of the earth toward any kind of surface water reservoir. Infiltration is when the water actually enters the soil. Percolation is when the water moves down through the soil, becoming part of the groundwater. And then condensation is water going from vapor to liquid. Finally, evaporation is water going from liquid to vapor. Vapor is also considered a gas, so water vapor is also considered a gas. So all of these are the terms that you need to know for the water cycle, and the next slide is going to be the water cycle spelled out. So whether you've been given a template or whether you're drawing out this diagram on your own freehand, you need to make sure you include all of the arrows and all of the processes and just all the parts to it. This one is actually more like a picture. So you have land, you have a human life, you have tree in there, and you have surface water as well as groundwater that's down below. So the driving force for the water cycle, we talked about that energy force, is really the sun. That's what makes the water evaporate and go from the hydrosphere into the atmosphere. So a couple of words on here. Sun energy comes in, hits the water molecules absorb that energy, it makes them move faster, so they spread out from their neighbors, the neighbor water molecules, and they become a gas. So evaporation goes up. And then transpiration we talked about is water leaving through the leaves through the openings. And those both join forces to provide that term that we mentioned in the earlier slide, evapotranspiration. That goes up, the water goes up. As it goes up, it encounters less energy. It's colder as you move up away from the surface. And so that cold air is able to absorb some of the energy from the water molecules, so they slow down. They don't have as much energy to push each other away in a gas form. So they slow down and they join again. And so we have, a little out of order here, but we have condensation taking place, creating the clouds. And you can see once those droplets defy, I mean, right now they're defying gravity, but once they can no longer defy gravity, they're going to come down in the form of precipitation. Rain, sleet, hail, snow, any of that stuff is going to be precipitation. It comes down. You can see the arrow down there, and it's going to hit the ground. Percolation is when it goes through the ground. Infiltration is actually when it goes into the ground. So the first thing that happens is infiltration, and then the second thing is percolation. I just lumped them together. And they become groundwater. This arrow is a little cut off, I believe, so it's going down through the ground and it's becoming part of the groundwater, which can extend your arrow out and it can hit into the surface water. Groundwater and surface water do interact with one another. So there's two ways that the precipitation can go. It can go down through the ground, infiltration, then percolation, or it can go and run across the surface and become what's called surface runoff. And that's going to follow gravity, and so it will go to the lowest elevation, which that's where the surface reservoirs are. The last thing that you guys have to write down is really how are we involved in the water cycle. I mean, we use the water for irrigation, for cleaning, for showering, for all of that stuff, for cooking, drinking, consuming. We do all of that, but we also have these ation words that we're a part of too. Respiration, perspiration, urination. That's all a release of water out into the environment. And then eventually that is evaporated, or it can go off into the surface runoff or down into the ground. So most importantly, I think transpiration and evapotranspiration are two words that are brand new. Infiltration, percolation, and then I'm not sure if you heard of surface runoff or not, but those are all brand new words. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation, you definitely need to know, but you've learned them since kindergarten. So here is an image that shows just, you know, a real world representation of some of the transfers of water from one storage to another. And it's important to know that in some places on the planet, this water cycle happens faster and slower. You know, water is distributed through the atmosphere and makes contact with the geosphere differently depending on the weather patterns. So we might be also using water much faster in certain areas than other areas. So for example, out west, our water table can't replenish itself because we're using it too fast. And I think that's it. Yep, because that's the carbon cycle. So there's the water cycle, and we'll talk more about this in class.